Hello, everyone. We are so happy to have you here with us on Stronger Marriage webinar produced by the Utah Marriage Commission, hosted by Utah State University. I am Nia Phelps, and we're so excited to have you join us today. In today's webinar, we are so excited to be joined by Niecie Jones. Dr. Niecie Jones is professionally trained in many therapy models. She received her master's degree from Utah State University and her doctoral degree from East Carolina University. She currently has a private practice where she works with clients in both Utah and California. Niecie enjoys working with African American and other Black populations the most. She is passionate about community work and creating spaces of trust, curiosity, and connection. Niecie is also a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant in industries ranging from the nonprofit sector to tech companies. Additionally, she co-creates a healing space for Black women called Radical Restoration that focuses on the intersection of rest, creativity, and healing. If you have joined us for the CEU credit, make sure to stay on until the end of the presentation. The survey needed for the credit will automatically load onto your screen, and then you will receive an email from the Utah Marriage Commission with your certificate. You may also email the Utah Marriage Commission to receive your survey for this webinar. Once the survey is completed, you will attain the email with your CEU credit certification. We will now turn the time over for Niecie for her presentation.
Thank you for that introduction. I appreciate it. And thank you all for being here. I was excited to be invited. Um, this is several months in the making. And so it's interesting how just current events have unfolded. And I'll get into that later, but there's interesting timing with a lot of this. So sharing some of these insights that I have with you, I'm excited to do that. So I will go ahead and share my screen. So it looks like my screen sharing has been disabled. So if we could get that addressed, then I can share mine. But to add to what was already shared about me, what I would add here is that as far as formal education and just like my background growing up, I grew up in a military family. And so we moved around a lot. I stayed, my family, before I was born, they lived overseas. My parents actually met in Germany on an army base. And over time, they moved back to the US, had a bunch of kids. And I lived in several states, places during my childhood. And so I learned a lot about people and getting to know them, understand them, their motivations, et cetera. And so that I think translates well into me being a therapist and consultant because I have to tap into those things and mediate and mitigate relationships pretty often. All right, here we go. That is the slideshow mode. Perfect. I moved to Utah when I was a sophomore in high school, and I went to Lehigh High, and then I got my bachelor's degree at BYU, and I think I see some BYU people in the participants, so shout out to all of you. Um, I got a degree in family studies, and from there, well, during that time, deferred, my schooling. I served in LDS mission. I grew up LDS. I'm no longer active. But yeah, finished, did mission, came back, finished at BYU, went to Utah State, and got my master's degree in marriage and family therapy. And then after that, went to East Carolina University, where I got a PhD in medical family therapy. And in 2020, right before the pandemic started, is when I moved back to Utah because there were just better opportunities here to have like personal and professional development. And since then, I worked at a residential treatment center for a couple of years, and then I moved fully to private practice and consulting. And I've been doing that for almost 3 years full time now, and it's been really good for the life that I want to live, way better work-life balance. I do therapy part-time and then also the consulting. I mostly do work right now out in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, with tech companies, but I also do a little bit of work here. When Utah had, there was recently a legislative session where DEI initiatives were pretty much shut down for a lot of public institutions. I think all of them actually, public serving institutions. So I've been helping to kind of helping those relationships and those transitions in some of our higher education institutes of higher education to make those transitions as it's been kind of rough for them. Um, so yeah, that's me. I also have a book coming out soon. Release date's going to be in a couple months. I haven't decided yet, but it's pretty close to what I'm talking about today, identity, and how they shift and change over time, and how we and the way that we kind of like come to know ourselves and like the world around us. So that's something that I'm excited about. And you can definitely talk to me after or at another time. Follow me on social media to learn more about that. So, the topic that we're diving into today, we're talking about social identities and how they shift in relationships and how that can impact relationship satisfaction. So, let's get some definitions out here so that we know what we're talking about. When I'm talking about social identities, I'm talking about the different categorizations that individuals use to describe membership to social groups. These categorizations are intersectional and create one social location in society. So, a framework that I was introduced to one year at a marriage and family therapy conference, a national one, is called the Addressing Framework. I forget the author of this framework right now, but you can Google it. It comes up pretty quickly. And addressing is a shortened term to describe age, developmental disability, acquired disability, religion, ethnicity and race, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, indigenous heritage, nationality, and gender. Now, there's several other social identities aside from these. For example, when I work with, um, in corporate spaces, we'll talk about workplace culture and perhaps, how your role fits into the workplace culture or hierarchy. Um, Especially when it comes to power dynamics, because understanding how our social identities carry both power, privilege, but also some of them carry burdens or oppressions that really determines kind of how we navigate our relationships with other people, including our romantic partnerships. So I'll give you an example using my own identities. So my age, I'm 35. I'm part of the millennial generation. As far as disabilities, developmental or required, I don't have any that I know of. Religion, none, but spiritual. Again, I grew up LDS, but so LDS adjacent, I guess you could say. As far as ethnicity and race goes, racially, I identify as African American. My sexual orientation is straight. Socioeconomic status is middle class. I do not have, when I talk about Indigenous heritage, I'm talking about indigeneity to the land that I'm living on, and I don't have any in the Americas. Indigenous to Africa, perhaps, based off of my, ancestry and my DNA results, but not to the Americas. My nationality is American, and my gender, I am a cisgender woman. So looking at these, there's definitely places where I hold some power and I have privileges, and then other places where I do not have as much power and privilege as others. Now, when we talk about relationship satisfaction, this is a subjective sense of relational quality arising from evaluations of the positive and negative in that relationship. So some components that contribute, this is not comprehensive. This could include communication, how you communicate your patterns, attachment style, sociodemographic factors, i.e. social identities that we just talked about, um, commitment to the relationship and your loyalties to it and your thoughts around that, as well as passion and intimacy. And that can be emotional intimacy, physical intimacy, intellectual intimacy, other types of intimacy here. It's not just sexual or emotional. So why is it important to put these concepts together? Well, Um, we live in a time where there's more focus on individual satisfaction than in previous generations. There's definitely been a shift from the collective to the individual, and a lot of it has to do with different social groups receiving rights, or receiving more rights, having more liberties. And as these social groups receive equitable treatment, they've got more freedom to consider what they want for themselves versus what they are told they are allowed to have. So we've got the civil rights movement, as for racial equity, class equity. We've got women's rights movements, different ways of feminism that are contributing to these things, sexual liberation movement, marriage equality, all of these different movements, these acts, and these are specifically legal things that were going on, and have been going on, continue to go on. They're creating more opportunities for people to think about themselves, their bodies, and how they want to operate in the world and how they want to be in relationship with other people. So the ways that we choose to enter, stay in, and live relationships, it's shifted. And this challenges a lot of what we would consider traditional ways that we viewed and experienced partnership. This requires us to be more aware and proactive in our relationships as identities and desires shift and change from what they were before. So I've got some interesting research, and this is based off of I believe it was Bill Doherty, who spoke at the Utah Association of Marriage and Family Therapy conference a couple years ago. He was our keynote, and he talked about differences in political affiliation and how we navigate those. And something that he brought up was that these differences, like specifically, they create more conflicts than maybe differences in like race, differences in like maybe religious beliefs, other things. He was saying that this one was rising to the top as like where the conflict was coming in a lot of relationships where there were differences. And I remember sitting there and thinking it was interesting. And also that it didn't go deep enough for me, because I remember thinking there, like sitting there thinking, I think there is truth to this. And also a lot of these like political differences come from how we're different policies that we're putting into place, different values, and how we're looking at other people, um, especially those in marginalized and minoritized bodies. I come from a history of, like, as an African American woman, there's a history of bodies like mine being politicized, and so it's highly like the political is personal for me. And a lot of people, I argue that it is for everyone. I don't believe that you can really separate the two, even though I think people try to in order to try and maintain relationships. But it's hard for a lot of us in marginalized and minoritized bodies to really wrap our minds around that, because our existence has always been political for people. People have always, like, since the inception of this country, gotten to make decisions about our bodies, and what happens with them and to them. Um, so some interesting research that has to do with political ideology here. Um, and this is more recent research. So perceived similarity is correlated with higher relationship satisfaction. So some have said opposites attract. That's a very popular phrase. And this may be true as long as there are similar values, even if other elements are different. And there's some evidence that political identity, a similarity, leads to higher relationship satisfaction, and that conservative relationships are more common than liberal unions. So two partners who are both conservative, that's, according to some of the research, that's more common than seeing folks who are liberal and are having high relationship satisfaction. I can speculate as to why that might be, but I think we really just need more research in that area to understand more about that. So before I continue, I want to let you know that, or remind you, I guess, that my perspectives, my opinions, these are all mine. They don't reflect the Utah Marriage Commission. And I'm certainly like not here to like tell you who to vote for or anything like that as far as like elections go. You know, that's on you and what you want to do. But I am going to talk a bit about our current political environment as far as the presidential election, because we are in a very unprecedented election season. And it has been so interesting to watch people respond to how things have happened and how we're moving forward in this space. um, and I think I said earlier that I chose this topic like months ago before um, there was that shift. I believe 45 days ago when the woman on the left, Kamala Harris, rose to the top of the Democratic ticket, whereas Donald Trump on the right, he was already at the top of the Republican ticket. And now these are the two like major party candidates that people are looking towards and deciding between as far as who to vote for. So uh, so watching this happen, and I will tie this into relationship satisfaction, but I do want to give you some context here. I think social media and even like just traditional media and being offline, there's a lot of like sound bites that I've been hearing, short form content, not a lot of nuance and like complexity and layers that I think a lot of us who sit and do the work of like thinking through and adding in history to kind of like put things into perspective. I think there's a lot we can miss when we don't have like a fair foundation here to make um, to maybe like broaden our perspective. So I'll give you a little bit of I guess insight into like how I reacted to watching this shift in like the political climate that we're in right now. Um, when I've seen several things happen since Kamala Harris rose to the top of the Democratic ticket. And it's interesting watching like we had like she would be like the first female, the first Black woman, the first South Asian woman, and to be president possibly. And it's a big deal for a lot of people. So there's a lot of excitement around it. There's a lot of fear around it. And I will be honest, watching this happen, like as a Black woman talking to other Black women who like work really hard behind the scenes to like elevate and advance ourselves, and other people don't really help us. Um, it parallels a lot of the experiences that we have had where we have credentials and we are qualified for the position, but then watching people tear you down, do whatever they can to like not give you the job, or make it seem like you're not deserving. It reflects so much of like our lived experience historically and presently. I can tell you as a therapist who works primarily with like Black people, Black women, women of color, um, I hear a lot of stories. I hear a lot of anger, fear, sadness around trying to navigate career and advancing and having people hold them back way more than I do with my clients who are not of color, my white clients. And so for some of my clients, this is triggering to watch this whole process come out and inclusive of however you personally feel about both of these folks up here. I want you to be thinking about how this may be playing out in your relationships. The relationships, if you're a therapist of your clients, if you are someone in a relationship and you're like paying attention to how people are responding to this election season, and you're kind of noticing some things that might feel a little weird or off, I do want to acknowledge that and like put this into maybe some more context for you, because I can tell you, um, I'm seeing it, my clients are seeing it in their relationships. And this is oddly reminiscent of another time when we had another Black president, then president elect, and President Barack Obama. And it reminds me a lot of a relationship that I was actually very intimately like aware of. And so I want to tell you about this relationship as a case study to put this into more context and how these shifting identities would impact relationship satisfaction. Okay. So we've got two partners. So partner one is African American, is a cisgender woman. And this is at the beginning of their relationship. So she was early 20s in the beginning of their relationship. They met online on a dating site. I think it was actually like LDS singles. So she's LDS. They both are LDS. She had a master's degree when they met. She was middle class. Politically, she identified as a liberal. She usually voted Democrat. Um, and she was straight. And partner two, um, this was a white Hispanic cisgender man. And this is important because though he was Mexican and Hispanic, he did not have a he was white passing, and he identified as white. And he also did not have a first or last name that like came from like his country of origin, his ancestry. He had a European name because his father was also white. So he actually often would not put forth that he was Hispanic or Mexican, except when he felt like he would benefit from it. So that is important in this relationship where there's one person who's visibly African American and one person who is white and or presents as white. This person was in their early 30s, also a Latter-day Saint. He had a bachelor's degree. He was middle class. He identified as conservative, and he usually voted Republican. And at the time, I believe he may have identified more as a centrist, meaning he was, yes, conservative, but like he could move towards maybe like the middle of the political spectrum a little bit, depending on the issue. And he also identified as straight. So this is how the relationship began. So I will talk. So let's go a little bit more into the relationship timeline. So how it started. Um, Politically, this was in the era of George W. Bush, who was a Republican in office as president. This is important because this will shift because as you will see later. So the couple they dated for 3 or 4 years. They had an LDS temple marriage. Even though there were some concerns that the male partner was racist, there were times I would hear from the female partner, like, you know, male partner said this, and I wonder if maybe he's racist or like has some racial biases, but like he's dating me and he loves me, so like maybe I'm the exception to his rule. I don't know, but like definitely some concerns there, and but persisted and kept dating this person. Got married. They were living separately at first because they were long distance before like moving in together. So the communication was largely digital. They didn't really see each other every day. They didn't see each other every day. Um, and that changed once they were both in the same state. And then it was more frequent, but they did have like more arguments once they were together. But inclusive of all that, both seemed mostly satisfied with the relationship. Hence, they got married. So then how the relationship shifted. So I should mention this relationship spanned the course of, I think, 11 years from like dating to engaged, marriage, kids, and then dissolution. So this is over the span of like 11 years. Okay. So then Barack Obama becomes president. And during even like that election cycle where, the female partner's noticing, okay, I'm hearing some more things from him and his family that are concerning. I think at the time there were concerns about Barack Obama's like nationality and can he even run for president, which was elevated by Donald Trump. He was one of they call it birtherism, but that was a thing. So so lots of attacks on Barack Obama, like personal digs that the male partner would engage in. I believe he even had a bumper sticker. I think there's a bumper sticker that or like a cartoon that used to be pretty popular of Calvin from Calvin and Hobbes, where he's like literally peeing on something. And I think like Barack Obama's face was like on the bumper sticker of what Calvin was peeing on. It was very disrespectful. So yeah, so that happened. So when they were married, they started to have kids. And before they had kids, female partner would try to tell male partner, like, you're going to have mixed children who look Black. So you need to like figure out, whatever is going on with you and your racial biases. And so then when they had kids, the kids were white passing. They did not have like a lot of melanin or like African features. And so um, that kind of changed things for male partner, and he did not feel as committed to honoring the female partner's racial heritage because, quite frankly, he did not see his own children as being Black. Um, so then over time, unequal household labor becomes more apparent as they're like co-parent, as they're like, rearing children together. They both have careers, but then female partner receives a doctoral degree, receives more praise and money than her male partner, which really bothers him because he's having a hard time holding a job. Eventually, the male partner cheats on the female partner. And then over time, more resentment grows. They become aggressive in their communication during disagreements. And then ultimately, the relationship ends in divorce. And the saga continues because the male partner has since adopted far right ideologies that have become, uh, I would say, like psychologically and verbally dangerous, both for the female partner or ex partner at this point and their children. Just hearing some of the things that have happened since then have been pretty concerning. But I offer this as just like a real life example of how these shifting identities can impact how the relationship is viewed and how satisfied people are. Some of the themes you can see here are political identities shifted for the male partner over time, especially as he watched a Black man like ascend to the presidency, have 8 years in power, and then there was a Trump presidency, which basically gave him permission, I guess, to espouse more of these racist ideas that were literally there from the beginning of the relationship. Um, there's some gender inequality and gender concerns, I guess, like traditional gender roles that really went out the window, I guess. And male partner had a hard time with it. Um, Communication patterns for both partners, they ended up worsening over time as they had a hard time really navigating these things. But those communication patterns, there were there were some signs there even at the beginning that maybe they weren't the best when they started out and when they were in the same state. So I'm sure you can pick up some more themes as I was talking that would where the identity shifted and maybe even like some of these patterns shifted for them to kind of contribute to the demise of that relationship. Um, and so even though this is like from the Obama era, I'm positive that there are people now who are going through similar things in their relationships because I hear it all the time in my therapy. Like, I did not know that my partner had these ideas about, X group of people. And when this thing happened, that just kind of made me think, huh, who did I marry? Or who's this person? Because I didn't know this, or I didn't pay attention to this, even if like I noticed some things before. And I would like to offer some skills to kind of help you navigate those things because these are difficult hot button topics, and it's kind of scary when you realize that like either you or your partner is like changing in ways that like you don't know if you like really jive with, if that really fits you, and how you want to move in the world and how you want to have a future like individually and with this person and with the family if you've got kids or are caregivers for someone. So let's talk about a few skills that can help you through this if you are experiencing this or if you know somebody in a relationship and they're experiencing some of these shifting identities and they're kind of struggling to navigate them. So the first thing, and I'll go through these more in detail, the first thing would be mindfulness of social identities, both yours and theirs. Mindfulness is the foundation of a lot of like regimented therapy, such as dialectical behavioral therapy. as well as this next skill or set of skills that I have here, distress tolerance. And these are techniques to temper the heat of the moment. And I'll talk about some skills there too, because when you are in this conflict and you start to have arguments or discussions where like there's just a lot of conflict, you're going to need some skills to help um, bring down that temperature to help you kind of move through that. The next one, these are specifically conflict resolution skills. And that is one of the things, like those having those skills is directly correlated to higher relationship satisfaction. And then the last thing we'll talk about is discovering values, both individually and collectively. And I'll give you a resource there that might be able to help you. I use values discovery with my clients all the time. This is from a model of therapy. Well, okay, a version of this is from a model of therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy. Lots of resources there, but yeah, when we get there, I'll share one resource with you. So with mindfulness, this is about, as far as like the shifting identities, this is about cultivating a present awareness of your social identities, your partner's social identities, where these social identities are shifting, and then how relationship satisfaction has changed over time. So we talk about mindfulness, we talk a lot about presence. Mindfulness is very like it's still very trendy as far as a therapeutic tool because it's accessible to everybody. Um, it's about being able to just be like present, aware of what is happening in the present. Sometimes that involves meditation if you want to do that, but mindfulness and meditation, they're not the same thing necessarily. So when I say being present of your social identities, I'm talking about when you go through maybe that addressing framework that I showed earlier, when you think about how you show up in the world and the social groups that you're a part of, um, pay attention to like, okay, how do I identify now? Like what are my different identities and how do I like present or embody them? And are yours shifting at all? Because maybe you're the one who's like having some like realizing some different things about yourself and that you're not the same person in some way that you used to be. And recognizing that that may be impacting your relationship and how you are interacting with your partner. um, your partner's social identities. Are you fully aware of like how your partner is embodying membership in different social groups and having conversations about that and where those things are shifting? And then again, being mindful of how the relationship satisfaction has changed over time. A lot of couples don't always talk about how they're how overall they're feeling in the relationship. There are some who do and have those skills and maybe have learned that over time to do like a check-in or an inventory. But there are a lot who don't do that. And sometimes it's scary to check in and ask that question because maybe you're afraid of the answer. Um, but if you are paying attention and you're being mindful, maybe throughout the day to day, it may be easier to bring things to the table that you're noticing about how, your satisfaction or maybe what you're noticing about your partner and like starting a conversation there to check in and see how satisfied each of you is. So other ways to be mindful would be journaling. That's a really helpful one for a lot of people. I know for some people it's overwhelming. So I don't want to say it's the only thing to do. It's not. But it can be to kind of just help unjumble the thoughts in your brain. Setting aside time to simply reflect. So if you're someone who likes to move, maybe doing like a walking mindful meditation could be helpful to give yourself time to think about these things up here that I've mentioned, cultivating a present awareness of. If you reflect at the gym, you like to exercise and go to the gym, or you're doing yoga, or if you're just sitting in your bed and you can't go to sleep, and maybe that's your time to reflect. There's lots of different ways to do this, but setting aside the time and being intentional about giving yourself the space to just be present with your thoughts um, and allowing them to just be. You don't have to judge them, don't have to do anything with them. You can just to be with them and acknowledge that they're there. Another way to engage in this mindfulness is talking to someone about it to get the thoughts out. Some people just need to like verbally say it. It's helpful to do that. So whether that's to a friend, like a close friend, your partner, a therapist, um, talking to someone can be helpful to help you be a bit more mindful. Now, distress tolerance skills. As far as relationship satisfaction, stress tends to impact relationship satisfaction negatively for same-sex and heterosexual couples. So some distress tolerance skills that I would suggest, but there's many others. So you can Google, other ones if these don't sound appealing to you. The first one would be self-soothing, and this one I would say is easy for some people, comes very naturally, and for other people it's very hard. Because sometimes when we're stressed out or distressed, seeking external validation from other people, so like wanting other people to kind of take care of our feelings, is something that a lot of people do. And external validation is good, like we do need some of it. And also we do need self-soothing skills. So self-soothing things like soothing touch. If you notice that like holding your jaw, hand on the heart, giving yourself like a kind of like a self hug. If you're someone who needs to rub their hands together, there's lots of ways to do this. Sometimes soothing touch can be helpful just to kind of like help regulate our nervous system when we're distressed. Um, Other things that people do, um, distress tolerance would be distracting ourselves. So, and this is another thing where it's like distraction is good in a lot of elements if it's helping you move through something to get you to like a goal. But if it's just to kind of avoid a situation or circumstances for a long period of time, may not be as helpful of a tool. And we may be kind of creating more harm or burden or shame by distracting a lot. But distractions would be maybe taking a break from a conversation and going for a walk, watching a TV show, reading a book, something that gets your mind off of the thing at present and puts you somewhere else for a little while before maybe you come back to address the thing that you're distracting from. Um, and again, these are distress tolerance skills. They're meant to be used like kind of in the moment. These aren't like long-term emotion regulation, like for the long term type of skills. So keep that in mind as well. Another distress tolerance skill would be exercise. So I talked about this a little bit earlier with the mindfulness too, but if you're someone who just like you notice like a lot of energy is like building up, a lot of adrenaline or something, or other hormones, or just a lot of energy, whatever you want to call it. For some people, exercise is really helpful in releasing it and giving it like a place to move, like using the body as to let it move through, right? Um, I think often still like with psychotherapy, especially like with a lot of models that we use, we focus a lot on like the mind, and some of us, can still forget like the body, and yeah, remembering that moving using our body to move through things is also helpful. We probably all need both of them, like mind, body, spirit, for those of you who are into that sort of thing. It's a full human experience. So, and then I put here other sensory experiences to regulate body temperature and also regulate like just nervous system function. So, for example, I like if you're someone who needs to like you need to like twiddle your thumbs or like play with a pen or something. If that's something that like takes you like kind of brings you down a little bit, those sorts of things. If you're someone who, if there's a comforting blanket or a food that helps you to kind of regulate yourself a little bit so that you can return to like maybe these like more high conflict like conversations or stressful conversations. That's something to do as well. These are just some ideas. Definitely do more exploration to see what works for you. And so that would cover distress tolerance here. Next one would be these conflict resolution skills. And as I mentioned earlier, these skills specifically also are correlated with like relationship satisfaction. So the higher you and your partner are practiced in like conflict resolution and using these skills, the better your relationship satisfaction would be. And then vice versa. Like the fewer skills that you have, the less practiced you are in this area, that's correlated with lower relationship satisfaction. Um, so I'll just name a few here. I think these are pretty standard ones, but they make a world of difference for a lot of people, especially when we're really like distressed, because a lot of times these things go out the window because the thinking part of our brain is not working as well in those situations. So again, the practice is going to be key here so that you automatically start to do these things when you're in these high stress conversations or situations. So some of these skills would be using yes and statements. So this is a dialectical technique, meaning that you're trying to broaden perspective and allow that there's more than one truth in a situation. So when someone says something to you, you say yes, validate what they said, and then you say and then you add your piece of the conversation. Another skill would be using I statements. So instead of saying, you made me feel this way, you would switch that up by saying, when you did this thing, this is how I felt, or I felt this way, so that you are taking responsibility for your feelings versus making them responsible. And also allowing people to like just kind of putting accountability where it belongs, but also like allowing this person to recognize the influence they had on you without putting all of like the blame on them. Um, Also helpful because you know, having a what is called a hard start, like coming in with blaming or shaming, it doesn't produce the results that we want most of the time. So trying something different, like an I statement, can really do what we call like it softens that startup of the conversation, so that people are more willing and receptive to hear what you have to say. Another piece of that would be active listening. This is another thing that we talk about a lot, both in therapy and then also like corporate settings. I talk about this a lot with the folks that I work with in DEI. Listening to understand versus listening to respond to people, and listening to them and showing them that you're listening in ways that honor them. Culturally, there's going to be different things. Like some people do not want direct eye contact. It's like rude to them. Other people want direct eye contact. Some people want you to repeat, like summarize what you said, what they said to you, so they make sure you understand. So checking in to understand how people um, want you to respond as well, which goes into the empathetic responding, honoring how the person um, wants to be, like how they want to be responded to, sort of thing. One more skill here that I think could be helpful. I learned this from another marriage family therapist and professor named Ken Hardy. It's called validate, challenge, and request, or VCR. So what you do is you validate what the other person has just said to you. And this is assuming that perhaps you like disagree with it a little bit or a lot of it. You validate what they said. Take the pieces that maybe you agree with, and then you challenge the pieces that were off to you or you don't agree with. You make a challenge, and then you make a request. What is your ask of this person? If it's like to do something differently or something else, you make a request, but it has to go in this order to have like better results. So validate first, make the other person like feel as if like you are with them, right? Then challenge, then request. And that can help these relationships and conversations go a little bit smoother. The last thing here that I want to touch on would be values discovery, and I use this with like clients all the time. I've used it with several couples, especially when there are shifting identities. So determining where these social identities as partners can coexist and where they cannot moving forward. So here is a worksheet that I've found to be very helpful with clients. And again, this is from the acceptance and commitment therapy model. And it's literally a list of a whole bunch of values. You can add your own. And what you do with this worksheet in particular is you start by marking off like your 10 most important values to you in your life right now. These are not aspirational values. These aren't values that like maybe are important or that you should care about. These are the things that you actually care about right now. You choose your top 10, and then I usually have clients go back and mark their top 5 and then rank them. And sometimes they push back, they're like, it's too hard. I'm like, try it out. And then with partners, what I'll do is I'll have them kind of look at each other's list and figure out, where are the values similar and where do they differ, and can this be okay, or how can this be okay to like, as moving forward as a couple or as a relationship. Some couples they'll go or relationships they'll make like mission statements or vision statements or vision boards based off of these values. And it can be really helpful as they're navigating challenges and like inclusive of whether or not the couple like eventually dissolves or the relationship dissolves or stays together. I found this to be a really helpful tool for a lot of people. So those are the skills that I would recommend using. And that is pretty much what I have for you in terms of this this presentation and shifting identities and how they impact relationship satisfaction. I will pass it back to you all for questions if you have them, and I'm happy to answer them. Can you send that value inventory? Yes, whoever I am to send it to at UMC, I will definitely send it to them.
There we go. Okay, thank you so much, Niecie, for that presentation. If anybody else, oh, is this working? Let's see. Okay, can you guys see me now? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So if anybody else has any other questions, you can drop it down in that Q&A thing down below. And Niecie can answer them. I do have one for you. How do you deal or confront someone that doesn't do well with like active listening, and how would you deal with that?
Hmm. I think something that can help. It's it can be like it may be harder before it gets better, easier. I think sometimes just naming that and
Mhm.
saying, hey, I'm noticing that you're having a hard time, like, or I don't feel like I'm being heard here. I'm noticing these behaviors that you're doing, and I don't know if you're aware of them or not, but I am noticing them, and they're not. I don't feel heard or honored when I'm seeing these behaviors, and then maybe making that request of like, could you do this? Because sometimes people need you to tell them specific things to like change behavior so that they can meet your needs. So that's one thing that could be helpful.
Okay, awesome. And then does anybody else have any other questions? I'll give you guys a few minutes to drop them down if you do. And then once again, if you're here for the CEU credit, make sure to stay on until the webinar ends for your survey and then the certificate. Um, for what was it that they were asking about? Let's see, the value inventory. Um, I will have you send that to me and then I will talk to them and see how we can get that posted. This webinar will be posted at some point, so they can also find it there. Is there a way that people can reach out to you?
Yes. So I'm on social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. All of those are at Niecie Jones, my first and last name, PhD. And you can talk to me there, and that's fine. I see another question here. Can you work with a couple when one gets reactive and interrupts, or do you refer to individual? Yeah, so this does happen sometimes. What I find, so yes, I can, or a therapist can. Sometimes you have to set some ground rules beforehand, especially when you notice that like maybe one partner tends to be more reactive or just like very emotionally expressive in a way that kind of like dominates the conversation. Um, and yeah, so ground rules, sometimes I'll say, like, what do you need from your partner as this happens? And a lot of times the person will say, like, the other partner will say, I need them to not like bulldoze me or whatever it is as I'm having this conversation. And then once you lay that lay those ground rules. If that keeps happening, like the person can't honor it, then I kind of check in with the couple and say, do you want to keep engaging this way? Is this helpful? Like, where are we getting anywhere? And I kind of let them make that decision of like, do they want to keep trying to engage this way, before I would think about referring individual. Sometimes I have them look for an individual therapist anyway, if I notice there's a lot of stuff going on that maybe is impacting the relationship that I can't address like on my own with the couple. Um, but yeah, I think there are ways to work with couples where one or both partners is more reactive and having a hard time really leaning into the process.
Okay. And then it looks like the value inventory is available at actmindfully.com. So if anybody wants to access that, you can access it there. And then if nobody else has any questions, just a reminder for the CEU credit, stay on. And then you can also email UMC, which is at marriagecommission@usu.edu for your survey if it does not pop up for you. Upon completion, you will get a certificate email back from us. Just a reminder that when I end this webinar, it looks like we have one more question.
Yes, I see it. Sometimes couples have different native languages. Have you found any tools helpful? Okay, I mean, this is very simple, and like this might I don't know, this might be like obvious. Sometimes Google Translate, they've really upgraded those tools to like you can speak into the translator, um, and like the translation has gotten more accurate over time as AI has like matured. Um, and sometimes, yeah, yeah, that's like the tool that I've used the most. I will say it sometimes it's not super effective when you're relying on technology to relay messages. And so sometimes if you're able to find another therapist who can speak, the other language, or, if you can get people in there who have some know how, if you can get a translator, that's good. Therapists who speak that language, even better, because they can kind of help you out to kind of like, um, yeah, to maybe like make sure that you're on the same page about how like what you're trying to where you're trying to get this couple to go. Because I have had situations where I've had a translator in there and the translator was doing their best, but like I could tell that like the way that I was delivering the message and the tone was very different from how the translator was doing it. And while yeah, it kind of created a little bit of tension. So maybe even talking to the translator ahead of time and helping them understand your therapy model could be helpful if you're able to find that sort of resource. Those are the ones that I have. They're not perfect, but those are ones that I have used in the past.
Awesome. Okay, if nobody has any, looks like there's another.
How can you express yourself politely to a partner without them being offended? Well, I don't know if that's always avoidable, would be my first answer. I think to your point though, I think there are ways. Yes, again, I think I talked about the soft startup. So again, like entering the conversation, maybe with a question, with an observation, um, and maybe asking, like getting curious about it, asking them about that, and then maybe having that be a way to lead into a deeper conversation could be helpful. Because again, those hard startups where you barge in and you're like maybe blaming or shaming, or just maybe you're also like in a reactive space, where maybe you're not totally grounded. That can I won't say that it's not effective ever. Like I think there are times when those moments like those startups can be effective too. But I would say look up, um, like soft startup and getting some ideas there. Those can be helpful in like making the conversation go more smoothly, even if you can't like even if the person does feel like slighted or offended, because I don't know that that's completely avoidable.
Okay, that is the last of the questions. I'm gonna go ahead and end this webinar. Thank you so much, Nisi. It was amazing. Just a reminder, when the webinar ends, we will be completely logged off from this. Thank you guys so much for joining today and have a great night.